We're to grasp onto all the things this life has to offer. We are left with big questions. Let's try and answer them together. Hi, I'm Danielle. This is
Mel.
And this is our conscious conversation. All right. So, how was your week?
Well, I think, Danielle, based on some of the things we were talking about before we set up for tonight, we're sharing some themes in terms of how our weeks work. So I'm going to ask you first, how was your week? Because I think we've been talking about shifting states, feeling good, the processes that sort of activate that, what's going on. So if that's okay, let's start with how was your week?
Well, I'm going to open it up to 2 weeks because I started in one place and ended up in another by the end of this week. And, last week it was a lot of focusing on these aspects of my relationships and my inner child response to these relationships, of how sorry,
talking of inner child.
is how that this inner child responds to these things that we are now bringing into light that might not align with who we are and what it is that we're looking for inside of a relationship. And as that crossed into this new week, I've noticed that it becomes this place of, I went from almost a victim stance in it to finding my empowerment. And this all led from a conversation that you and I had. And it was you just had flat out told me, you don't have to keep giving those pieces of yourself to somebody. It's not your job. It's not your responsibility. And that really stuck with me. And so I really started processing that thought as I was integrating this new experience of my inner child having a say so and what my relationships look like. And inside of that went from this victim stance to the self-empowerment of, I just need my distance now, because here I'm going to make sure that this is how I feel, and this new empowerment that I'm having is going to not become vindictive or egoic, or the process is going to be fully encompassed before I step out of it. And as I put myself through those feelings and thoughts and distance myself, I realized that this kind of came down to a rule of detachment, and that inside of that detachment requires boundaries, and inside of that boundaries requires empowerment, and inside of that empowerment comes this child that maybe wasn't empowered. And to learn how to do that, and in the steps that you take it in, was very inspiring to me. And I really sat with it and learned from it and realized that I can love somebody in the depths of my soul and still know that there is appropriate times for me to say, I need time and I need to step back. And I don't feel like I'm being honored. And then finding out what those reasons are for myself, why I'm not feeling honored in a relationship. And once I started really processing that, I realized that, all I have to do, and it's very simple, is state, hey, for me, it was an idea. I have this life. What do you go? Whoop, whoop, whoop.
There you go.
All right. So sorry about that delay. I have children. And so I realized that inside of this newfound acknowledgement that it was okay for me to say the things that I need. And part of that need is I'm full of these beautiful creative ideas. And I love sharing my ideas with others. I love including other people inside of those ideas. But what happened over the course of time was my ideas would be taken and then used as their own personal idea. And somehow I latched onto them. And that was not the case. And I knew this to be true, but I just didn't, I would find myself just being beaten up over it. And then it would turn into, I just stopped sharing my idea. And then I realized that that was also damaging me, because I have a creative free spirit, and I like to share this who I am and what I'm experiencing in the creative side of my ideas. And you know, part of that boundary line is to just say to the person, hey, that I need you to acknowledge that this was my idea. I don't care if you acknowledge it out in the world, but I need you to acknowledge that to me. And that's okay to have that feeling of I need to step myself into this arena again, and I need to be able to feel that I'm not this ghost who just drops ideas into your head and then you can take it and run with it like it belonged to you. You do have a certain level of acknowledgement that is to give to me, and I don't need you to you know, say it over and over. I need the one time. And that's okay for me to ask this, because I need us to be on the same page. Otherwise, my little overthinking mind will just go into the deepest, darkest reaches and come up with the most asinine reasoning as to why a person does this.
And, trying to analyze the situation rather than just acknowledging that that's what's actually happened.
Yeah, because sometimes it's really hard to acknowledge that a person is doing this to you. And it's easier for you just to say, well, this person is, you know, manipulative, or this person's, you know, just wants the power, or this person wants this, which sometimes is the case, right? It is.
But the naming, the diagnostic element doesn't actually help with dealing with the problem, does it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it was funny, because after we had gotten off our last podcast, I had explained, kind of told you the story about the ideas, and I have, you know, this specific friend that is coming up where I had an idea, shared the idea. The idea has now been taken on as her idea. And that really upset me, because this isn't the first time it happened. And so I brought this into, you know, I verbalized this with you. And then that very same day we went to go shopping. And we had gone shopping specifically for this flower arrangement that I had found at a local greenhouse, a local nursery. And so I took my friend there. Although we couldn't find the exact flower setup, we found all the flowers, and we're going to make our own. And so we then come back to the house, and we decided we're just going to pop the flowers there. And I remember this very specifically because the flowers were so beautiful that I actually was on a video chat with this person, and my husband was sitting next to me, and he looked up the flowers. And then while on the video chat and my husband next to me, I show her the flower. So my affirmation, my truth is there. I have that. I knew it. We get back, we're planting, and this person looks me dead in the eye and says, whose idea was this? Was it mine? We'll call it we. We had the idea. Just like, now it's minuscule. Honestly, I don't care about that specific event, but it just happened to be piggybacking on something that was very true to my heart, you know, an idea for a business that was very important to me. And it was my passion project. It wasn't that person's passion. It's becoming that person's passion project, but it was mine. And in that moment, I just kind of sat there and like went silent, like, wait, did I just manifest this? Or, you know, did I intend this and manifest this? Or is this more proof of, you know, like the affirmation of my thought process that I had just gotten out on the table that day, right?
Yeah.
And so I walked back inside and I spoke to my husband and I said, was this the person that I was speaking to about this specific flower? And he's like, yeah. And it's like, so I tell the story. He's like, I'm not grasping why she did that. And I was like, so now you're kind of seeing, you know, like, okay, here's affirmation of what I'm feeling being brought into life in front of me in real time. Okay. It's like the outline of what I said happened. was happening to me in real time. What do I do with that? Right. So that sent me back into, I need a hermit. I need to put thought process into this. I need to really figure out what it is. Because for myself, I always go to self first. I clear my triggers before I even begin to look at the other person involved in the problem.
Yeah, reflect on it all first. Yeah.
Yeah, and because sometimes it's as simple as you're being triggered over something silly, and that's okay, because I can't even call it silly. Your triggers are not silly. Your triggers are valid. You just need
exactly.
to get the baseline for it. And I realized that this was a pattern that had been a cycle, if you will, that has been happening for as long as the friendship had lasted. And so at first you get the feelings of the anger and resentment, that bitterness feeling that comes up like, whoa, I literally just told this person the past week about these insecurities, and now it's like it's being thrown in my face, and on a repeated basis, and with excuses to boot, and so I asked for distance. I just need some time. And inside of that time, I was really able to get together an observation of what the reality was versus what my version of the truth and her version of the truth would be. And the reality is, just because there's not ill will intended, even if it's the simplest form of just a mishap, down to the most manipulative patterns that were conditioned into a person, I still have a right to state out loud my feelings. I still have a right to state out loud that I am allowed to hold something, even if it's for a fleeting moment, something that I've created with love, and hold it as mine. And that's okay. I don't have to have any reason behind that other than, hey, this was my idea. Like, please give credit where credit is due. And then we're done.
Yeah, but it sounds like the process, though, for you is you needed to acknowledge all the rights that you do have to do that before you could come up with what do I want to do about it, because you were having all the feelings before and you might have had responses and would question them or dismiss them or ride over them, but you've got to a stage now where it's so blatantly obvious, like on the same day, and even when you've told the person that how you feel about those things, and it's happened again, so now it's that checking in with yourself, isn't it? Yeah, I have a right to feel like, oh, I am feeling like this. I did notice this. What's happened there?
And for me, it was trying really hard not to pack up and leave, which is something that's much easier to do, right? But who am I to preach walking down the path to examine it one more time? And by that, I don't mean continue the friendship, continue this, but who am I to not examine the pattern, the cycles that are that you're inside of, and not claim responsibility and accountability for the pieces that you let slip, the things that left unsaid, the words that you never spoke. Who am I just to pack up and leave, instead of just saying, okay, you know what? This is a pattern that I've allowed my entire existence with this friendship. So it's just going to stop here. And it will get bumpy for a minute, because it always gets bumpy for just a moment, because nobody wants to be delivered information that they've hurt their friend. Nobody wants that. That's hard information to receive, especially when you love a person. But my feelings are valid too. And I'm not going to cut myself up into bite-sized pieces for people to grasp any longer. I'm now in this place of this empowerment I've never felt before, this place of I am just as deserving and I am just as valid. And just because I can see your whole side of this picture doesn't give you the right not to attempt to see my side of it, or to at least for me to speak up my side of it, to give you opportunity to see it, because I do have the gift of seeing deeper. But in return, that leaves me with the responsibility of speaking that truth, of speaking my feelings, of speaking the validity that is me.
Of bringing it up to examine it again.
Yeah. And, my whole life has been, I feel like I closed this huge chapter in my life, which was, I've always been so concerned about the other person's feelings and well-being. I don't want to be the cause of another person's harm. I think I've said this out loud to you a few times. I don't want to be the cause of another person's harm, but I'm now in a place where I won't allow another person to be the cause of my harm either. And to know that that is a beautiful boundary that I get to set and be valid inside of has made these last 2 weeks such a pivotal moment in my life. It was those blocks that I was having with the podcast and trying to learn again, and because I was being filled up with all of these other thought processes and all of these other emotions that were stored inside of me, and I wasn't allowing to release productively, that it was closing other creative doors in my existence. And the moment that I realized my truth, who I am, what I represent, and that I am a valid person with valid feelings that is allowed to have boundary lines and needs, it just kind of ricocheted me into this new empowerment movement of myself of this is who I am, and you don't have to like it. I'm not here for your approval. That's not my existence. My existence is my approval, and I'm not doing anything that's going to harm. So let's check your triggers. Let's check your blockages, and let's not come after me anymore. And that, it's time for us to maybe address the elephant in the room instead of making me
Yeah. So let's stop carrying everyone else's shopping. Let's stop taking responsibility for everyone else. Let's stop thinking for them. Let's stop analysing the situation. Instead, let's check in with ourselves, that mindfulness that we talked about earlier, of being mindful of what am I experiencing? What's this about? Is it past stuff? Is it to do with, Uncle Bob, that shouted at me when I was 12? Well, no, because it's happening right here and now. But the pattern is it's happened several times before, and now it's so clear to you that that the disservice you'd be doing to yourself once you start to feel empowered is so much more painful, because you can't ignore it in the same way. When you don't know it's there, then it passes you, but you might feel irked, a bit frustrated, not right, and it's not always clear. But once you start to realize, that hunch gets bigger of, hang on a minute, every time I say this happens, or I see this behavior, and you don't like it, and it continues. And then it's even harder once you've shared that with someone and said, hey, when I see this happening, this is how I feel. And then they just go ahead and rambankle right through, the same behaviors again. Then it's even tougher. But it's, like you say, it's a painful process. It can feel like that. But when you go back into yourself and decide exactly what your rights are, what you're entitled to feel, you're entitled to see, you're entitled to communicate, you're entitled to deliver. Whether they get it or not isn't your responsibility. Whether they care or not isn't yours. Whether they protest or not isn't yours. And if there's such a protest where the two of you have got a very different way of viewing what's fair, equitable, and equal within the relationship, of however you both define that then it's a pivotal point, because now it's changed the dynamics, hasn't it? Because you become empowered and you're not the victim. They're no longer the persecutor.
And now I'm sitting in a position of, acknowledgement of who I am and what I represent. And it doesn't, like you just said, it doesn't matter if they agree with me or not. It doesn't matter if we're coming from two different places. At the end of the day, I deserve just as much thoughtfulness as I give out. And I have been setting myself at a different standard than everybody in my life for my entire existence, because for my entire life, I thought that I was just meeting the exception to the rule, right? And then I come to find out I was the exception to the rule. And it took me years to finally get that through my head, that I was the exception. But that just means that I am now only going to allow exceptions of the rule with me, because it is about quality and not quantity, and who I want to put in my life and around me, and who is rooting for the growth and who wants to sit in stagnant waters. And, I, once you've learned and kind of equipped the detachment rule inside of, this law of detachment, which is we're on different paths, and we're just choosing to, hold hands down our separate paths while we can. um, it doesn't mean that I have to stay back for you. It doesn't mean that I have to keep coming back for you. It doesn't mean that I need to convince you that what I'm saying and what I'm feeling is valid.
Well,
And
it means whatever you're aligned with. So there's a couple of things in this. One is, what does self-empowerment mean? So how do you know when you haven't got it, and how do you know when you have? And underlying that is our beliefs and values. And what you're talking about is, in order to feel maybe some of the things that you would have felt in the past, you might have had to have particular behaviors in which to respond to the people in the environment that you did. But then when those situations shift, or you shift, we can still set things up in a similar way because it's so familiar. It doesn't mean to say that you desire it or want it. It just is the way it's been, because we won't have necessarily seen a different interaction. And if you've not felt empowered, if we say to anybody, what is empowerment? Do you feel that? Well, that might be, there's all sorts of that internal self-talk, like what you're highlighting now, you examine is, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? And you've got to know that that those things are okay. It's acceptable, that we need to stop judging ourselves so harshly and being critical. And some people will take responsibility for everybody else, and some people will take no responsibility for themselves. So what's the self-empowerment bit? How do you know when you haven't got it, and how do you know when you have?
That's a really great question. I will tell you that, for me, the way it does feel with self-empowerment is I have a right to be here in whatever capacity. I have a right to be here. I'm here, aren't I? So, uh, the opposite of that would to feel like, in order to belong, you must mold or change yourself to fit into whatever. I've been telling people, I'm a circle. I don't fit into square holes anymore, because at one point I would shape myself to fit into that square hole, and that wasn't my shape, and it was very uncomfortable for me, and it wasn't my consistent state of being. And as you continue to transform yourself into this square hole, you're going to start getting points. You're going to start having the little points on the edges.
And it's
so,
that, and it's that sometimes lower level feeling that an irritation, a slight frustration, or it's like wearing a pair of jeans that are too tight. We don't realize that that's our body telling us some quite big messages of, this doesn't fit, the house doesn't fit, the box that I'm trying to fit in doesn't fit. The box used to fit, but now I've expanded. I like different things. I like different hobbies, or I like the things I always did, but now I've got the confidence to pursue them.
Yes. And I think, for as far as empowerment goes, that's a really great question. Whenever you are feeling that you don't fit into anywhere, when you're feeling that you don't belong anywhere, when you feel like it doesn't matter what you do, it's not going to change a damn thing, that would be a lacking of empowerment. But the moment that you realize that I'm here, I'm alive, I'm breathing the same air that you're breathing, therefore I have a right, and you then get to choose, as the opposite human being of myself, if you want to be around this that I am.
Yeah.
That's up to you. And taking away the responsibility of having this feeling that people need to like you, or people need to respect you, or people need to do these things. When you let go of all of that, there's this natural gift that occurs, and that's, oh, well, I'm pretty awesome. I'm a pretty good person. I'm a really good friend. I go above and beyond, and I've sold myself short for so long, just being that friend, and realizing that until we started talking, I hadn't had that in return. boulder was taken off of my shoulders, and I was able to recognize that I was a pack mule. And I just decided I don't want to be a pack mule anymore. I want to be a luxurious unicorn now. So I'm going to go do that instead. So that was my week. It was very productive, very good. I feel in a really positive space. I'm ready to just like take on the world at this point. Like nobody's stopping me.
So it's sort of it's indicating some of those feelings that you get as well, isn't it? When you confront something that has been an itch or a sore or something that's just creating disharmony, and people don't realize that there can be several of those components in their lives, and sometimes we have to pick through each one or pick on the one, sort of the one out that is causing the most thing. I used to feel it as almost like if I had, you know, this energy field around me, I used to feel like it was just this constant gnat that was in the energy field. So it wasn't a big thought, it wasn't a problem, but it was this irritation that my attention would be drawn to. And I remember when I was thinking about anything at all that you have, whether it's your desk that needs tidy or your car that needs cleaned or a suit that you need to get to the cleaners or pick up, all of those things sort of sit on the periphery that grab your attention. And if you've got so many of those things grabbing your attention, it all just melds into one and it just feels overwhelming. But when you sort of move them out of the way and start to sift and sort through them, you start to realize the ones like that actually hit things at a deeper level. You know, there's a deeper process taking place. The suit's sort of immaterial, isn't it? It's just the activity, the motivation to go and sort it out.
Right.
But the deeper mechanisms of how we've grown, because we talked in a previous episode about conditioning, and so this is that movement forward from, we're all conditioned in our experience in the culture that we're in, whether that's race, class, gender, whatever that is, the type of work we have for years, whether we've chose that or the family thinks it's a great idea, we do that job. How we behave in social circumstances is all that conditioning. And a proportion of that is to help us manage life and be a part of the group to some degree, because people don't feel as threatened when there's more people like us, whoever that like us element is, and the majority element makes that road a bit smoother. So you hang out with your mates and you share the same music and you've got similar interests and it makes it smoother. Feeling odd and different is not a nice feeling for a lot of people. Some people go out to experience that and feel it extravagant and exuberant, and other people find it quite difficult. So we move out of that conditioning, but then we start to notice these where it's working really well and we've got most of the elements of life sorted, but we still have this noise in our ear, and that noise gets louder. And with something as fundamental as, you know, we give them more time, attention and space than we give ourselves, at the cost of our esteem, empowerment, energy, all of that, then that is something that we have to look at, which is why I was asking, you know, what is empowerment? Because I think if we asked a lot of people, where are you in terms of your self-esteem and your confidence, and how empowered do you feel? Because empowerment is what also then revs up, like what you're experiencing now, the assertiveness, the drive to just pursue what you like, what you want to do that day. And it's not about being selfish or selfless. It's a different force, and it's hard to describe to people, isn't it? And equally, when I'm in that zone, then there isn't really any need for external validation. It's just a case of who are the nearest, dearest around you, and how do you orchestrate things so that everybody gets their needs met and nobody becomes invisible in that system. And the person who's invisible is the one that people aren't noticing because they've not claimed their space. They've not stepped into their body and claimed their space and say, I have a right to be here. You know, I have a right to enjoy these foods, or have a right to have fun with friends, have a right to rest, have a right. It's sort of like you, well, it is your human rights, but this is on a individual level within within yourself, isn't it?
Mhm. It is. Yeah, it really is. It's been I do find it interesting because, as you were saying, if we were to ask a lot of people about empowerment, where would they be on that? Say it was a scale of 1 to 10.
Yeah.
Then it makes you wonder, because as I look back, it always goes back to that self-awareness thing for me. It's all about awareness of self, and that will lead you into the breakthroughs that you need. And I've always felt like I was an empowered person until I would break through to a new level and realize how disempowered in these aspects of my life I was.
Yeah.
Or
so it's not multifaceted. You can be really empowered at work. So a lot of people can feel really driven, heard, assertive at work, but then in personal lives they haven't got that sense of power, or in their families they revert back to being the child that they were. But what sometimes happens, and this has happened to me in some workspaces, the personalities that were part of my past that I hadn't moved through started to reappear in colleagues at work. So you can move away from your home, you can go to the desert, but somehow somebody will come along at some stage that just has some of those components that makes you, oh, right, I've got to deal with this. And we can either go, it's your, like what you said earlier, it's your fault, you can blame them, they don't do this, they're a this, they're a that, whatever the this is and that's are. Or no, what is it about this interaction I'm having with this person that I find difficult, and why is that difficult for me? And you're right, sometimes we have to decide not everything needs communicating. Sometimes it's we just change and shift and people feel that and things alter. Other times we highlight it because we want to check out, are they aware that they're doing this? And if they are, can we rectify this because it's now unequal? It takes me back to values. So is this an audit? Is it like an audit of the values that you had or that you thought were yours, and now it's a redesignation or an inclusion of new values? Have you done a bit like the kid that has those letters on the fridge that moves them around? It sort of feels like you're doing a bit of, well, I thought they were important, but actually that's going in the not so important stuff, and that's moving over. Is there a bit of that shifting?
Yeah, definitely. Because I'm finally hitting, because, we revisit our cycles just to make sure we learned the lesson, or to see if there's a deeper lesson inside of it.
Yeah.
And as you go through the layers of that and you get deeper into those, the spiral that is life, revisiting these lessons to make sure you learned them, you seem to have this more sense of control of what this spot, because in the beginning of your shadow work, or the beginning of your acknowledgement of self, you're just doing this topical stuff, right? Like, okay, I have to get rid of that, right? And then as you get in deeper, it becomes more of I don't like how the furniture's set up. I want to rearrange the living room today, and then maybe tomorrow I'll rearrange the bedroom. And although that might take people off guard, that's not my problem. It's my furniture. It's my living room. It's my bedroom. And so that's really what it's coming down to is, maybe this worked for me in the past, but it no longer serves me.
Yeah.
I want to grow inside of this, and I don't want to sit here and look at the setup in a living room that's not appeasing to me anymore. I want the couch over there now, and now I want the TV over there, and that's fine. And I'm sorry, I'm not really sorry, but yeah, here it is. And if you like it, then you like it, and if you don't, I don't care. Your opinion of me does not make it valid. So
it's interesting to use the metaphor of a house as well, because within dreams and within the psychology aspects of it, the house is your personality, and you're choosing to look at the different features within the house of what you like and don't like, the walls, the furniture, and looking at what can move, and do I want that in that space, or do I throw it out? But also, why is your view of what's in the house actually any of your business? Because it's only becomes your business when I'm interacting with you and I'm either rude and insulting, but that's based on our perception anyway of what somebody defines as rude, insulting, or whatever, because that's their beliefs and values. And sometimes it's a bit of a complex process to sift through, especially if there's more than one of the people that, if they share some similarities. And like you're saying, you found out you were the exception to the rule, rather than thinking, that they were, or the people you come into contact with, and then that can make it a bit difficult. So you have to sometimes face losing all of that, stepping away from that, because none of that works. And if it and to change a group, or to only get on with the one person in the group, that changes sort of the whole dynamics. So it's that I think you were saying earlier, stepping back and reflecting on that. Where am I? What's going on? Why is this triggering me? And you don't come out of that until you get some sense of why that's important to you, because at that point you can discern how you approach that. And if it's still a difficulty, then you get help to communicate that and figure that through.
And sometimes it's as simple as, like sometimes we just need to discern what's me.
Yes.
What belongs to me and what belongs to them. And that can get messy if you're in the in-between stage of like, hey, this belongs on this side of the shelf and this belongs on this side of the shelf. And if you're in the middle of restructuring that and you try to speak your mind, you might not come from the place. I think one of the favorite things I've ever really taken advice on is, let's not speak when you're still in the emotional space. Give yourself time to settle that emotional space into a logical space. And I'm not saying that emotion's not attached to these logical analytical thoughts. I'm just saying that
it's not that.
The emotional body is not taking over for the analytical thoughts, that they're working in tandem. This brings me anger because of this reason. Oh, that makes sense now. Whereas opposed if I thought inside of the angry space, it becomes more of a victim stance. It becomes more of a, this person did this to me and how dare they? And I've said something out loud about to this before. But when you settle that and you're in the middle of saying, and then you just say, hey, will you ask that question?
Yeah. So you've talked about the conditioning and, the kind of messages we receive about ourselves and how we decide who we are in our interactions with others, and what starts to happen when you start to sift and sort and try and think about what's your reaction, how am I responding to different people. So if you're carrying those frustrations and you're carrying that anger, and even if you don't make decisions at that time because you're in that emotional space, which often they say you're locked in a trance at that point, your logical cognitive mind is wiped out, not the best time to get involved in a conversation. I certainly know if I'm a bit moody, no, leave it until I've rejigged myself, sorted myself out. So moving into that empowerment of going from a sort of disempowered, can't do it state, invisible, am I this person, am I entitled to that, to then moving into almost the polar opposite. What then happens? What's that experience like for you?
For me personally, it was like a literal weight being taken off of me. Like the realization of it's okay. And all of these things that, as you said, like a little gnat that was in my peripheral, and I know it's going to come and bug me soon. It kind of just floats out of my space or out of my vision. And it's like, I have now freed up, all of the space in my brain to relax. I have been sleeping so well. Wow. I have been eating better. Because I'm not doing the mindless eating, because I'm eating just to eat, because I'm not able to be
because your mind was so distracted with the cycles of thought and the consistent analysis of it, and the what did I do, and all of the old behaviors that are disabling. Yes, and it's very distracting.
And until it's a free space, you don't realize how much they're
how
taking
full it was, how much
yeah,
it takes up.
yeah. And so now it's like it's only been a few days, but it was like an immediate more restful sleep. I was waking up better. You know, I had gone through a little bit of, I was just sleeping. It was like the epiphany happened, and then it was like, now it's like, it was like, now you can catch up on all of that sleep that left you so tired for so many years. Go get some sleep. And I slept and I slept and I slept. And it was weird because
Wow.
I'm not a napper. And I was taking like 3-4 hour naps and then getting 9 hours of sleep at night. And that's just the opposite of who I am. I'm like, I'll sleep 7 hours and then I'm up for the day. Um, it gave me this freedom to not feel that I'm responsible for another person and where they're at. It gave me this freedom of to be able to just exist without the concern of another's opinion or their thought patterns, or this need to construct this huge tower moment for myself. And just
Yeah, playing out the various scenarios in your head. Oh
it,
boy, does that take up a lot of work, doesn't it?
girl, it prevents me from doing so much, you know. And all I'm really starting to notice in in these moments that follow that that activation, integration, and then putting it into, you know, into play, it's, I'm noticing the free time. You know, we had talked about, you can expand time within your day by being mindful in it. And I'm becoming more mindful at my day. I'm becoming more aware of my surroundings. You know, they tell you when you have anxiety, you know, to count a certain, you know, 3 things that you can see, you know, 3 things that you can touch, you know, things like that. I'm actually not having to remind myself of those things. I'm just in that space. It smells like cookies, or it, you know, this fabric feels really good. You
It's
know, I'm
more present, more
yeah, I'm gonna
present.
touch this fabric, or I'm decided to make a salad because that's what sounded good to my body. And it's funny because I didn't realize I want to say this is the correct term, physiological response that we have to our the amount of release that I had. I have a medical called IBIS with
Yeah.
constipation. And between sleep and barely eating food, and when I was eating, it was super healthy, I was getting rid of, I felt like, years of just,
Wow.
you know, because if you look back and see, if you look into the research for IBS, it's mostly in women, and it's the way we carry our stress. And when I released that, it was like an immediate other release. And so it was very interesting to watch the body's response system.
And such a powerful one, really obvious one.
Very obvious. It was like
a real contrast. Yeah,
here is your, you know, this beautiful reward that you're deserving of, and these 3 different arenas, just because you made the choice for yourself.
and actually that's a really good point, because often we stay with those things that look, we might judge them as immaterial. Why am I making a big deal of it? It's not like I've lost my job. And you know, and people can do that. You know, if we carry that in our system where we dismiss it ourselves, other people can also dismiss it, so we end up believing them. It's like, oh, you're making a big deal out of it. Well, you know, to you it's a big deal, to me it matters. And it's that part of, well, this is what my rights are, because this is, I actually can acknowledge and validate how I feel. And the energy with, in a way, this is how they talk about depression sometimes, the energy of suppressing consistent slights and knockbacks, or people dismissing your views, your joy, your enthusiasm, your hopes, your inspirations, because that's the other element we've talked about. You know, if you're a creative person and you enjoy your photography, or you enjoy your art, or you know, it's part of your job, or you've got to create stuff, or you get excited about a movie you've seen or a book, you know, and you've got friends around you that, oh, you know, well, what's she getting so excited about? It's another way of pouring, you know, pouring something on your fire. And fire is the symbolic of your solar plexus in sort of yogic sense. It's it's what fires us up and drives us forward. And I remember when I was doing the yoga teacher training, and we were looking at the elements of wood and fire and water and air, and we did a yoga series for each one for a few days, so we could really experience them, like what you're saying. What is the physiological experience of this? And so I remember going through each one, and I thought, wood, no, this feels like what I've been doing for the last year or so. Did the fire, and the fire, no, sorry, not the fire, the metal or air, which is very esoteric. It's linking with universal consciousness. It's doing the chanting and mantras. No, that was very familiar. When I did the fire and the water, with everybody noticed it. The next day, it was like this joy and natural, bubbly, happy, interacting, open-hearted me. It had shifted me out of what I felt I'd been sluggish and flat for about, I mean, I know I'd had the accident and stuff, but sluggish and flat for like 6 months. And I was like, I'm in wood too much. You know, I'm earthing okay, and I'm fire, metal. I don't need to be doing any more of that. What I needed to do was the processes and the water, which is the flow, the movement of allowing things to flow through your system. And it really hit home how our energy systems can just get sluggish. And in a way, with thyroid issues as well, it's like everything gets sluggish, your muscles don't work in the right way, your system slows down, you're more thirsty, you end up with constipation, physiological effects, you feel heavy. And I was feeling heavy, and I was moody. I was on a yoga teacher training, but moody, waking up. Oh, don't want to do the yoga, cold. So all of those elements of mentally, it plays around your head and it interferes with any other creative sparks. It's tiring, it's enduring. It can be a drip effect if you have that from several people. And these things over time, because what they say in some arenas is that by the time something turns into a physical pain or knee issues or neck issues, it's been long in your system already, because it goes through, in terms of the 7 bodies, the subtle bodies, and it takes a while to manifest as that, and sometimes can then take a while to clear that. But for me, like, your awareness of how you unpacked what you stepped into your awareness of what you were experiencing and unpacking your feelings about that. And I'd gone into moving from static sort of yoga to then a fire move, and for me it was overnight as well. And I felt this, and I know if I do that now, because I get into bad habits, I get into the old patterns of thinking I'm tired or sluggish. So, and it's not always that for me, because we've got different, you know, you were talking earlier about your energy. Mostly of the time you can be up and dynamic and active, and I've been the opposite. So in a way, what I've had to do is learn to integrate some of those opposite ways of being to get that balance. So it's fascinating, isn't it? The mind, the body, the spirit, everything that is just utterly impacted when you've got what is sometimes a gnat buzzing away that you can't let go of. And I don't know about you, but I do circular thinking, which is one of the behaviors, you know, that in terms of all the behaviors that will make it more likely that you feel depressed, of, you know, have a conversation with someone and I can replay the whole interview conversation, where it could have gone, what I could have said, and all of that. And I've since learned, I think, like what you were doing, is to look at that and go, okay, what do we learn from this? Okay, what would I want to do about that? Because if that comes up again, when you can visualize it, it makes it easier to do it, you know, and then you get back into a different state.
Yeah. I do want to go back to your the yoga experience that you had with the metal, water, fire, air, because, you know, my guides have always been very, you know, keep it simple. And so what you just said to me, it resonated differently than when we've talked about this in the past. And if you can just compare, you know, the fire to, you know, this is, I need to be empowered and I need to feel this joy and passion.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
right? So now we concentrate on fire, light a candle, focus on a fire, you know, bring things in that bring that type of environment to you. Or if you need to be in flow, you know, you can literally get in a body of water. You can go take a
Sit in the
shower.
bath, do a shower,
And
do yoga flow moves, dance. You know, if it's
dance,
music that inspires you, dance in your living room, skateboard, cycle, because they can be flow, they can be fast and extreme and exhilarating, but yeah, the flow. And so it's, you're right, it's like all of those, a bit like we spoke about a few weeks ago, that each chakra has a crystal, it has a color, it has a smell. And so it's recognizing what is the struggle that we're feeling at the moment, and do we approach that, which aspect of the whole array on the buffet of holistic approaches, or, you know, medical approaches or whatever, do we utilize? And for me at the time, the reason I think the yoga was meaningful, much more meaningful for me, is because I'm an analytical person. My job's analytical. So the cognitive analytical and the feeling stuff, I was well versed in. But all of a sudden, I was arriving at a place of, but what's still going on with my body? You know, I've changed my thoughts, I'm managing my emotions, I've talked about all this stuff. What is it about my body? And I think next time we talk, we can look at, okay, so what are the deeper mechanisms that are going on that we start to experience in the body? Because what I started to understand, that some of those is about how our body stores information, how the weaknesses occur, how illnesses happen. But it's that, I think if we looked at the steps, it's those steps that we have to take to, and I was drawing something out the other day for the program that I'm working on, of the cycle of change, and we talked about that as well before. The cycle of change is, sometimes people don't have any awareness of why they're doing what they're doing and why they're feeling discomfort, and sometimes the discomfort has to get so bad that it makes them pay attention. Sometimes it gets so bad as in crises, it makes them take action. And the crisis can come because they had all the signs before and they didn't see them, or they didn't listen to people, or for whatever reason. And they start to become aware of that, Rob. So the awareness starts to kick in, and it depends on what skills you've learned and what knowledge you have, or who you talk to, that says, this is happening, how do I make sense of it? So with young people, they're learning this stuff for the first time. They're learning about every emotion. They're learning about how the thoughts influence the feelings, influence the behaviors, and that cycle. But sometimes adults haven't learned those phases in their childhood years either. So they're moving into a state of becoming more aware. And that might be when they're also going through the process of searching religion, searching psychological theories, doing workshops. That process of searching and going to workshops is that now taking on information so that they start to become aware, because in a way you sort of need some information to draw from. So there's no right information. So whether it is mysticism or science or religion, or so you draw from that information and you see what fits and what doesn't, and you start to grow in that confidence. And then you can start to that's where you become the experimenter. You test things out. But that requires courage, because it's so easy, a bit like when we start diets every new year. You know, we've got all these intentions, we're at that process of making a change, we start to take the steps, but either people and things can pull us back, or the homeostasis of being comfortable, say nothing, because it can take a lot of courage and confidence, doesn't it, to stand up and be counted and speak your mind, unless you're just that. Some people are that, they're born that way, and others can be quite timid.
Well, for me, I was born that way. And through years of conditioning, I again became a square peg.
Silenced and pushed it down.
Yeah, and it would make sense that, you know, my body responded the way it did, and you know, for the aspects of the autoimmune disorder with lupus, and how I've been in remission for a couple of years
That's
now.
amazing. Yeah.
Right? That this IBS I've had since teenage years. And so that is a deeper shedding and layered up processing for me to bring that up and out of my body, because it's had all of the time to integrate into me, and me being a person who disassociated from my body, from this physical realm that I'm in. I was sent chasing, symptoms, because nobody could figure out where the diagnosis was. Nobody could find it. What's the problem? Oh, it's just, it's
you just know. Yeah. You just know you're in pain, or that it's uncomfortable, or the mechanisms aren't working. And it was quite, it wasn't that well known about, was it? 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And we're only now just starting to make the connection that if a lot of children get tummy ache. So they get that because actually they're upset, and the stomach ache is, sometimes it's hunger, sometimes it's something else, but the tummy ache, the body speaking. And I've worked with women because in different cultural groups, our ways of managing or manifesting emotions are different. So I worked with a group of women once where we were talking about mental health, but the language doesn't translate the same in different cultural groups. What we understand about mental health, or our mental faculties anyway, and how we manage emotions and what we think about all that, is not, it's not the same. And so we were having a conversation, and it was interesting because, I was trying to describe depression, anxiety, the common things we feel from day to day. And it was interesting. I started to notice they were saying, my stomach gets tight, or I feel pain in my heart, or my shoulders ache. And it was all expressed through physiology. And I thought, all of these people are going to the doctor, say, I've got a shoulder ache, I've got a stomach ache, I've got this. But they didn't have a language in the same way for the mental health, but it was in the room. And therefore I was now responding body to body now. Okay, so when that's like that, and I used a different model. When that's like that, that's like what? And we went into the land of metaphors. They were really receptive to looking at things in terms of, where do you feel it? Has it got a colour? Is it got a size? And you feel into that experience. You start to give it words, or you start to give it voice, but in a different way. No longer trying to fit it to the ascribed model, because the ascribed model doesn't work. And that's the difficulty. Sometimes we don't have the language. We don't have the ideas to work out what the thing is. So we walk around trying to figure it out without having access to all the potential information. And it depends, and there's so much information now, it depends on who you talk to. But certainly in the Vedic culture and, and Ayurveda, the food that you eat, the sleep that you have, the water that you drink, the clothes that you wear, the colours that you choose, the environments you put in, all influence our states. So if our poor systems are bombarded by the sun, by the moon, by the wind, by the rain, by the energies of people, and then we're hypersensitive, well, we've got to get all of this in some balance. Otherwise, and that's let alone some of the difficult friendships that we might have, or the difficulties that come up in that. And it takes us to another learning edge, and to grow and learn, we've got to have the resources and capabilities to do that, haven't we?
It's true. Because living in the type of society that you and I live in, be it, the working class, the feminine side, we still live in a society that is honoring mental health in ways that it hasn't before. But that doesn't go across the board for everybody,
No.
There is a class thing I've noticed with your mental health and what you know about it.
Yeah.
And people, that have access to these things have a little, they're given, they have the ability to have more clarity if they use it. But some people don't have access to any of this, and they're living in a world that's, all they can do is their five senses, and that's how they can exist.
And try and figure it out, when actually, and I think we originally, when we first started talking, we're quite keen to talk about some very simple things that people can do that uplifts them from feeling like I've
Why I really like your metal the what is it, it was Chinese, is that the correct?
Yeah, so that's the elements. So the elements. So the yoga is the yoga with the meridians and the Chinese 5 elements, and so it incorporates the energy systems in our bodies, because each one is associated with an element, and each element is associated with an organ in the body. So the liver is anger unexpressed, the kidneys filter out all the toxins, and so it connects them all up on all of those deep levels. So whether you believe, whether anybody believes them or not, it doesn't matter. But if they're feeling flat and sluggish, it's either that the body needs to rest, but if they've been doing that, for 3 or 4 days, it might be that there's something else going on. So are they eating the right food? Are they drinking are they drinking water? And what movement is lacking? If they're not moving at all, whole metabolism. And I see this with Jay being diabetic. I can see with his blood sugar levels how each of the foods that he eats affects his body. I feel with my thyroid issues, I feel when my muscles switch on and when they don't. And I've now since learned how I can get them to switch on, and how I switch on in the mornings. But it's processes. But when I learned it was mind blowing actually when I did that fire element, and within an hour. And now if I wake up feeling flat, bit moody, bit, because we're all a bit philosophical, aren't we? So we go into that philosophical hole from time to time, the darker place that we don't necessarily want to live in. And I get up and I know now that I put on, like the music you sent me earlier, I put on that music, I put on a candle, so it's visual, it's fire, it's sound, all the different elements. And I start doing Kundalini yoga. I'm doing more of that. So I'm firing up the spine, I'm working on the energy, warming up the system, warming up the energy centers. And I can feel the lightheartedness and the joy starting to come. That by the time it's only about 20 to 30 minutes now. Before, it could be days and weeks. It could be, well, it was weeks. Then it was a week. Then it was days. And now I can feel that shift where I'm like mesmerized by the light, mesmerized by the rain. And it's a shift that is as clear as day and night.
I think I've decided in just this short amount of time that I want to like do some yoga with you. I really think it's very interesting, and just to try it and to see, like, because I have this full trust in you, and I know that your guidance and the way that you guide is for the highest good. And that for me is very important when I entrust my physical and spiritual body. And let's be quite frank, your emotional body is quite involved in this as well. And I tend to shy away from groupthink or group activity in that way, just because you just all of that, because of the situation you're in with, everything still being all shut down and you being able to film everything you do. I really think this would be something telling me to say, would you mind including me or recording a session that I can then follow later on? Because I think that you're on to something really amazing, and it's simple fluid movements that allow not only a great stretch and allows this flexibility to come back into your body, but when you're connecting this to what we do energetically and healing, and then adding in the elements that are so important to just connecting to everything that we are and what represent. We are made from the stars, dear one. Therefore, you are made up of everything that this earth and this world is made up of. So you do connect in that way. If you don't mind,
I'd love to.
I'm gonna stick my needy pin into you and say, can I need you in that?
That's not, well, it's not needy at all. It's a beautiful request, because I'd be honored to do it. So I would love.
You're just amazing. So here's the thing, Mel. I have been waiting